are the top 3 worst alternate picking mistakes and how to fix them. But here's the thing, I'm not going to give you some boring exercises. Because look, you can find that anywhere on the internet, and that's not what you need. What you need are exercises that specifically solve mistakes that you're making in your alternate picking. And look, if you still aren't able to play as fast or clean as you want with alternate picking, I guarantee you're making at least one of these 3 mistakes. Mistake number 1, how can I expect to alternate pick fast and clean across all 6 strings if I can't even do it on one single string with a metronome? I figured this out a few years ago when I was trying to learn this Paul Gilbert style run. And for the life of me, I couldn't play it to speed. So I started to break it down and I said, okay, this is triplets and it lasts for 5 clicks, 5 beats of the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But can I even play triplets fast and clean on one single string across 5 beats? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I realized that the first mistake that I was making is I hadn't developed coordination on one single string. So I developed the exercise that I'm going to give you right now. And you can do this with any exercise. Essentially what you do is you take the exercise that you're working on, in this case for me it was the Paul Gilbert exercise, and you want to take the same amount of beats that you're going to be covering in the actual exercise and just do that with a few notes on one single string. And I can pick any notes, but I just basically need to work on my synchronization, my speed, my cleanliness, staying relaxed. All of these details are super important to focus on one single string first. Mistake number 2. I took a lesson from this guy. I also interviewed John Petrucci and Andy Wood, and I obsessively studied Troy Grady's material. And the data is crystal clear, guys. If you suck at alternate picking, this is the mistake you're making. You do not understand the art of string transitioning. String transitioning is where I'm alternate picking on one string and then my pick makes its way to another string and I continue alternate picking and I might go back to this string. If I'm in a string transition scenario where I'm going from the A string to the D string, there are only 2 ways that my pick can make that transition. Either I'll be doing a downstroke on the A and then an upstroke on the D, or I'll be doing an upstroke on the A and a downstroke on the D. And let me tell you why this is important. Because the way that I angle my pick on the first scenario, going down and then up, is completely different than the way that I would angle my pick going up and then down. So if I'm doing an alternate picking sequence and my last pick stroke on the A is a downstroke and then I have to do an upstroke on the D, here's what needs to happen. My pick needs to be angled slightly upward this way. I'm gonna exaggerate it for you, but it needs to be slightly angled upward this way so that after I do my downstroke on the A, the tip of my pick can fly over and just barely go over and almost graze the D string before I do an upstroke on that D string. So it should look like this, down and then up. If I had my pick just straight and I didn't angle it any particular way, obviously my pick would just go straight into the D string. I would do a downstroke here and it would just run into that D string. Now, how am I gonna be angling my pick if I did an upstroke on the A and then a downstroke on the D? So if I'm alternate picking here on the A and then my last pick stroke in the sequence is an upstroke, what I then have to do is I have to slightly angle my pick downward. Okay, I'm exaggerating it for you. I wouldn't do it this much, but I have to slightly angle it downward so that my pick will miss the A string as it goes to the D string. So if I'm going down, up, I have to slightly angle it downward so that my pick misses that A string as it goes to the D. And the opposite is true. If I'm going from, instead of the A to the D, if I'm going from the D string to the A string after a downstroke, then what I'm gonna have to do is I'm going to have to angle my pick a little bit upwards so that after I do this downstroke, my pick will miss the D string on its way to the A string. So it would look like this. Downstroke, slightly angle it up, misses, up into the A. Now, if I was doing an upstroke and then going down on the A string, what it would look like is this. I would have to do an upstroke and I would have to angle my pick slightly downward so that my pick would miss the A string before it does a downstroke on the A string. Again, if I kept my pick just flat, I would go up and then I would run into that A string. Now, it doesn't matter what type of alternate picking sequence you're doing. You have to pay attention to what's happening with your pick at each string transition point. So if I'm doing a simple 3-note per string like this, I have to pay attention to the first string transition first, and I have to master that. So what's happening here? Well, I'm going 3 pick strokes, down, up, down. So after this last downstroke here, I have to make sure my pick is angled slightly upward so that it misses the D string before I go up into the D string. So it looks like this. Down, up, down, pick flies over the D string, up into the D string. If my pick was at a downward angle or even a neutral angle, it would run into the D string, and that's what's causing you to sound sloppy. It would be like this. So I would sit there and I would work on mastering that string transition for as long as I need to, like this. I don't need to work on anything else until I master that. And I'm doing this with the metronome. That's crucial. Now the next string transition, I have to pick up where I left off. This is extremely important. The last pick stroke that I left off on was an upstroke. So if I'm doing 3-note per string, I'm gonna go up, down, up, and then I transition to the G string. Now the last stroke of this D string is an upstroke, so what I have to do is I have to make sure my pick is angled slightly downward so it misses the D string on the way to the G string, like this. Up, down, up, like that. If I had my pick at an upward angle still, or if I had my pick at a neutral angle, I would hit the D string on the way to the G string like this. Right? And that's what's causing you to sound sloppy. So in isolation, I need to work on that. I need to go up, down, up, and then make sure my pick goes slightly like this before I go to the G string. Up, down. And then once I've mastered that string transition, then I do both string transitions together. And I'm gonna exaggerate the pick angles here, but it's gonna look like this. And then you're not gonna do the pick angles that huge. But in fact, you wanna do them as small as possible. But the point is the angle of the pick is gonna be changing for each of those string transitions. So I have to master them one at a time, and then I have to put them together. So again, mistake number 2 is that you don't understand string transitioning. And even more specifically, you're not mastering one string transition at a time. So your exercise is simply this. It's one of the best exercises to work on mastering one string transition at a time, is to take this 3-note per string sequence, and you master one string transition at a time like I showed you in the close-up, and then you put them all together. Mistake number 3. You hear it all the time, and it's that you have to start slow and gradually increase the speed. And do not get me wrong, that's a huge part of it, but that is definitely not the whole picture. There's no way a world-class sprinter could become a world-class sprinter if they don't train their fast twitch muscle fibers. And that's the mistake you're making. You're only going from slow gradually to fast. You have to start implementing something called speed bursts. And I got this from John Petrucci. He told me that he does this at the end of his practice every day. Now the idea with speed bursts is they're bursts, they're short bursts. So we're not doing the whole exercise. We're really pushing our limit with speed, and we are taking just a few notes. So if I was doing this 3-note per string thing that I showed you, and I'm really wanting to push the speed, what I'll do is I'll start with 6 or 7 notes first. And you know what? Sometimes I'll even start on just one single string, like going back to the first mistake. To train speed, I'll say, okay, can I do this on one single string first? Just maybe 6 or 7 notes. And then from there, I'll add in a string transition. Now adding in a string transition won't work unless you've done your proper heavy lifting, at a very slow speed first, where you've really understood what's happening with your pick at a particular string transition at a slower speed first. But at the end of my practice every day, I'm doing this. I'm taking something I'm working on and I'm really pushing the speed. And again, the whole point of this is to train my fast twitch muscle fibers. So here's your exercise to combat this mistake. It's to take this 3-note per string thing, and it's to start with a very few amount of notes, maybe just on one single string first. Turn on a metronome, turn it up gradually until you really feel like you're pushing the speed, and see if you can just do a few notes at a time. If you start feeling comfortable, then you can add just literally one single note on the next string. And then as you feel more comfortable, you can slowly add 1 or 2 notes at a time. You do this every day at the end of your practice. So just to recap, the 3 mistakes are, number 1, you're not developing proper speed and coordination on one single string first. And to practice this every day, you put on your metronome and you simply practice things like synchronization, relaxation, playing in time on one single string first. Mistake number 2, you don't understand string transitioning, and more importantly, you're not practicing one string transition at a time. So the exercise is to take this 3 note per string exercise and to practice one string transition at a time, master one string transition at a time, and then combine it together. Mistake number 3, you're only practicing slow gradually to fast. You need to take this 3 note per string exercise and you need to do speed bursts at the end of your practice every single day. And look, if you want a deeper dive on how to effectively practice this sort of thing, click this video right here.